I made this wood-fired bathtub recently and it works great, but it's a bit of a mess around here. So today I'm going to tidy it up.
Part of me thinks if the bathtub works fine, then why bother tidying up? There are always more pressing things to do around the place. I can feel guilty for doing something that on the surface is frivolous. I've been thinking about this as I go through the process of making the area more functional and aesthetically pleasing. What it comes down to is what the Epicureans would describe as ars vivendi, the art of living. With anything we do in life, it's easy to ask, what's the point? If life itself can be approached as an art form of sorts, one that requires intention, balance, and the appreciation of aesthetics and experience, for me, this supplies meaning. I mentioned stoicism in the last video, and I think on the surface the Stoics could seem a rather pragmatic and even austere group. But actually, there's also the appreciation of harmony, simplicity, and a well-ordered life. If I left this bathtub exactly as is, the job of weeding and cutting back the grass would have to be done regularly. A few weeks would go by, the weeds and the grass would come back, and I'd have to deal with them again. This would go on indefinitely. Since we spend a good deal of our time out on this deck, I'd also have to look at the long grass and weeds. Neither of these things would bring me much happiness and could well irritate me. When I say could well, I mean there's no doubt about it, it would irritate the hell out of me. Unlike Stoicism, Epicureans focused on pleasure and tranquility, but in a refined, intentional way. This was not indulgence, but an appreciation of simple and beautiful experiences.
I was just going to put some gravel for the fire to sit on next to the bath, and then I thought, well, before you do that, why not put some steps in down there? The most straightforward way to do this would probably be to get 2x8, use it as a stringer, cut the stairs in, and run it like that. The problem is I'm never particularly great at doing things in a straightforward way. I'll show you what I mean. So I've already got these different 3 platforms set up at a different height, and I thought you could do the same thing here going into this bath area. So rather than just have a series of steps running there, you could have a large sort of square platform where that metal post is, and then another square on top of that. I don't know, I just think it will look better. I like the idea of these little platforms. They feel like little areas to kind of just look out onto the bush and look out onto nature. I'm just sort of making it up as I go along, but I think that's going to look a lot more interesting than just a set of stairs.
Epicureans believed in surrounding themselves with beauty, nature, and good company to cultivate happiness. This is exactly how I feel about these steps. Obviously, they have to allow us to step down into the bath or onto the garden or down the path to the bathroom, but there is much more to it for me. Nothing makes me happier than to wake up in the morning and step out onto these little platforms and to watch the sun rise over the bush. To me, they are like viewing platforms. They take my gaze out into nature. To me, they are inviting. At night, I can hear the crickets and the occasional moorpork owl. In the day, I can hear the rhythmic pulse of the cicadas. In the morning, the birds will come and feed from the berries on the trees. It's too easy to turn on my phone and be pulled into a world of vacuous nonsense. So I need the real world around me to be easy to access, because once here, it is way more enticing.
So this is where I've got to so far. I did a bit of the cladding just to tidy this little bit up here, and then I've concreted some posts into the ground. So what I'm going to do now is build a box. Effectively, it will be a box with joists sitting inside the box, and then there'll be other floor joists sitting on top of the box, and that will give me two different levels. That's partly to give me a step off the deck onto the grass, but it's also a good way of making it slightly easier to step into the bath.
Talking about ancient Greek philosophy and the idea of living life as a work of art might seem like lofty idealism. But I'm not trying to create a work of art that other people will find beautiful or inspiring. I'm simply creating an environment that I want to live in. Other people might find the idea of living in a bus with a deck and a bath attached to it completely ridiculous, and that's fine. In the colder months, when we light the fire on the bath stove and it heats up the water, the whole thing is utterly charming to me. New Zealand has the clearest skies I've ever seen, so to sit back in the bath and look up at the Milky Way, it's magical. I found this cast iron bath at the dump. At first I would just light a fire underneath it, which was fine, but there's some effort in getting the fire hot enough to heat the water, but not so hot that you burn yourself.
That's not bad.
The stove simplifies the whole thing, and as a result we use it way more often.
That's exhausting. I don't often use a handsaw, but the notching those posts out, the cut's slightly deeper than the blade on my saw, so I need to just do it by hand. And I'm just, whenever I use that saw, I'm taken to the generation, you know, or maybe two generations before us who, man, those people were just, I don't know, man, they must have been a different breed doing that all day long. It's absolutely exhausting in the heat too.
By adding these steps, I'm just continuing that same process of gradual improvement from a fire under the bath. I'm designing our surroundings so they are more functional, easier to use, in the hope that we will use them and enjoy them more often. I'm gluing in the waste pipe. I want the used water to go on a tropical garden I recently planted. In the winter, our default evening activity is to watch films on Netflix in the bus. Having a hot bath this close to the door means we will more often spend time in the evening out here instead. I think I have an overactive and busy mind, and yet when I'm out here at night gazing up at the sky, time can drift by and I'll look back and think, what was I thinking about? Usually the answer is nothing. That's a rare thing for me, and so anything I can do to make moments like that more frequent is likely a good thing.
I've just laid these boards in place for now. I actually don't have enough deck screws to sort them out, but that's good for now. The next stage, I want to make this a bit neater, so I need to bring up the level very slightly so that goes into the sort of plumbing bits of the bath, and then it'll also act as a bit of a sort of a step. So if this has gravel in it, it will then be a bit easier to step down without stepping on all this junk.
I find it quite easy to be pulled down the rabbit hole. There's so much choice in the world with what we can engage with physically and mentally. A question will pop up in my mind, and rather than let that go unanswered, I'll Google it, and then I'll start reading and reading, getting further and further down the hole. This is not curating experience or living with intent. This is just being mindlessly hurled in any direction depending on which way the wind's blowing. This is what I like about the phrase ars vivendi. By treating life as art, it forces us to choose more carefully. I'm bringing out the steps and the gravel area for the stove to match in with the rest of the deck. This should give it a nice clean look. Thinking about it, I wonder if there's a connection between the Greek concept of sacred geometry and the golden ratio and ars vivendi, or the art of living. When you think about it, sacred geometry aims to create harmony and balance in art and architecture, and Ars Vivendi is about doing the same thing, but in life itself. I'm very tempted to Google it, but maybe it's best I don't. I only need a small amount of gravel here. I'd hoped to be able to cobble enough together by taking some from the pathway. Unfortunately, that didn't quite work out, and I had to borrow my neighbour's car and trailer to go to the local landscape supply store. I like to think of myself as similar to a rugged, can-do New Zealander. However, I've never driven with a trailer before, and when it came to reversing it into position, I displayed the fact that when it comes to trailers, I am still very much a Londoner. This stove is a wonderful little thing. It's so simple. There's just a coil of metal inside the stove. Water flows into the bottom, and then it heats up and it rises through the coil, and hot water comes out of the top. No pump needed.
Well, I suppose for the final shot, I should be sitting in a hot bath with the fire on, but it's not really the weather for that, so I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. See you next week.